Who do you think live a healthier life? Those in the European Union or those in the US? Are you better off living in Europe or are you better off living in the US? All right. So we have a very special presentation today. So some of you may have watched a recent video where I was mentioning or recapping my participation in the conference, which was an amazing conference. And perhaps I'll talk a little bit more detail about that another time. But today, I have a special guest on. I'm excited to have this particular guest because she is the source of my mitochondrial DNA. And for those who know what that means, you would automatically know that my mom is joining the platform today. So I'm going to formally introduce her as Carlita Moore. Thank you for joining us on the platform today. We're excited to have you. And more so, thank you for joining me on the, I would say, backpacking kind of sort of trip throughout Europe. So how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Awesome, awesome. Have you recovered? It should be the first question I ask. Have you recovered from our trip?
Well, actually, I think it took me a week and 3 days to get over our trip.
That's about right. It was, I agree with you. It was definitely awesome. And that's about right for those who have looked up jet lag and how long it should take to get over jet lag and the switching of time zones. That's about right for the time, for the amount of time and just the level of activity that we did. And we'll share a little bit more about that later today. But today we're going to focus on my mom's observations. She's going to share with us things that she observed about the health in Europe, and we're going to compare it to America. And I know some of you guys are probably going to say, but Europe is a group of countries versus the European Union specifically is a group of countries. And we're going to include one country that's no longer in the European Union. But nonetheless, we're going to kind of lump them all into one category and compare to the US. And we are acknowledging that we're comparing a group of countries to a group of states. But some people may argue some states feel like they're different countries, but that's a whole other conversation. So, Mom, I'm not going to use your formal name. I'm going to
Okay.
call you Mom for this.
Okay.
So, what was your overview about the health in Europe versus the health of Americans? Like, what was kind of like the big takeaway?
Well, what I noticed most of all is that a lot of people were walking more than driving. A lot of people was using a lot of bicycles to get around. And that was very intriguing to me to see how many people were just using their actual feet getting around and their bicycles. When we went to Portugal, it was a lot of hills, and we actually had to climb hills to get to our destinations.
Did that surprise you?
It was a surprise to
Yeah, I
me.
was surprised about that too.
That was the furthest thing to my thoughts, that it's going to be very hilly. And actually, when I got there and saw the hills, everything was hill. Everywhere we went was hill. I was like, oh my goodness, can I do all these hills? But thank God I was able to keep up with my daughter with all the hills.
And our tour guides, right? I think at one point our tour guide had mentioned where we were. There were 7 hills around the area, and we stayed in Lisbon, which is the capital of Portugal. For those who may be wondering specifically where we were, um, but and they were not. They were very steep hills. They were varying levels of incline, but I would say overall they were pretty steep.
They were. They were very steep. In a matter of fact, it reminded me of my childhood in my country that I'm from. It's very hilly, but these were even more hilly than my youth.
Yes.
They were very hilly. And I was so happy and so thrilled with myself getting going as fast as Taska. Sometimes I'm lingering behind, but I catch up with her. It
Yeah,
was
you kept up really, really well. Really, really well. We're gonna get into the lifestyle of Europeans. And there are variation. I'm sure you're gonna mention this also. There are variation from country to country. For the most part, there was some consistency between the European countries that really left a mark with us, I would say. So let's get into up to the lifestyle of Europeans. So you saw that it sounds like you felt that they were a little bit more physically active than those of us in America. Am I drawing a correct conclusion?
Yes, you are. I was very impressed the way that they seems to do a lot of exercise there. They tends to walk a lot. They run in groups. It seems as if their mothers have groups where they run, and maybe college kids or college children, they run a lot. And I was very impressed that it seems as if people don't really stay still, just sitting around. They keep on going. And I was very, very impressed with the movement of the people in those countries.
Yes. What would you say about their mode of transportation?
The cars are very small. They use a lot of bicycles. They use a lot of bicycles. They go to the schools to pick up their children on bicycles, and I was very impressed with that.
Any particular country stood out?
Paris, Paris. I think I saw more bicycle in Paris than anywhere else. They
Yeah.
really shocked me when coming to that.
Yeah, I
The way,
remember we were standing at a corner one day and we were just kind of watching the amount of bikes. As you mentioned, we saw all different generations on bikes, which was really interesting to see. We saw the young people, we saw older people also riding their bikes.
yeah,
We saw moms with the kids in the back of the bikes.
yeah.
So something we do have bike riders here in the US, but I would say it's more impressive the numbers that we saw in Europe. And to your point, in terms of physical activity, the stats that's available, and I will definitely provide the sources for some of the stats that we'll be sharing today. But 4 in 10 adults in the European Union are considered to be physically active. 4 in 10 adults. So about 40%. Of adults are physically active in the European Union. In comparison, in America, it is said that 28% of Americans adhere to the physical fitness guidelines that is meant to keep us all healthy, and that's 150 minutes of at least moderate exercise per week, or 75 minutes of more intense exercise. So we can definitely say, according to the CDC, they even said specifically that 24.2% of those who are ages 18 and above are physically active in the US. So definitely a very much stark difference. I think your conclusion is correct that it looks like the countries in the European Union, and we went to, for people's references, we went to England, and we went to Portugal, as my mom mentioned, Madrid as well, and France, different cities in France as well, and then we ended up in Italy. So when we speak today, those are the countries that we're talking about, and we will give reference specifically when there are specific references that need to be made. So yes, they are by far way more active than we are.
I noticed that when I eat the food there, I was feeling light in my body. I wasn't feeling uncomfortable in my clothes. I was feeling very good.
Would you say their food was more fresh?
Yes, I think it was because I can taste the difference in their meat.
Yeah, and because you're also from the islands, you know what fresh meat tastes like, right? Because you grew up on literally chicken from the chicken coop and fresh fish from the sea. So yeah, I would definitely have to agree. And I think also, I agree with you that I didn't have as much GI symptoms after I ate the food, and I felt more energetic. Like I wasn't getting a lot of sleep, and there may be an element of adrenaline because we were trying to get so much done. But I would say overall that I felt more energetic when I ate their food. And even when we had a heavier meal, you didn't feel as loaded down. You felt very light and still content. So it wasn't like you felt hungry at all. You're very much content. And I do agree that the meat, I ate a lot more seafood. I was so longing for seafood, y'all, because the issues with the Pacific Ocean. We'll talk about that another time. But I was so excited to have some seafood that I focused a lot on the seafood that we ate. But to my mom's point, even the vegetables, you can see the color, the taste was very distinctly different. The taste of the vegetables just really nice and fresh and crisp. And it didn't matter which European country we were in. I would say across the board, we felt that the meat was, and I'm thinking about some of the meals we had, my mouth was watering. The meat was so good and the vegetables were so great, and the seafood was uncomparable. So yeah, and to your point also, we know that there are specific chemicals that are used in American food that are completely banned in other countries. And perhaps another time we'll sit down with our nutritionists and go over that with you for you guys. But keep that in mind that overall, other countries in like the countries in the European Union are way more restrictive. To my knowledge, and you guys could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I'm right on this one, that they're more restrictive in what goes in the food, especially food that caters to its children, than America is. And so that was definitely another distinction.
That is so true. It is so true, Taska, because I realized that even the bread,
Mm-hmm.
is eat a lot of bread. The bread is one of their main source of food there. And
Specifically, which country?
in Paris,
Mm-hmm.
and
So in
when I
France, we saw a lot of bread.
so,
A lot of croissants. They weren't playing.
yeah, and although I have a problem with bread when I eat it in the States,
Mm-hmm.
when I was there, I had more bread than I ever thought I was going to. And I was not feeling no way. I felt light.
Yeah, yeah.
It
And we also noticed that a lot of their bread was fresh bread. Like they were not playing about the fresh bread. And I think also to a certain extent in Madrid, because in Madrid they were very one of the most popular food that we saw them eating was the jamon,
the
the ham sandwiches,
yeah,
and it was always with fresh bread.
yeah.
So I think definitely one thing is we eat a lot of processed breads, stripped down grains. So we really don't get the nutritional benefits as much. And we definitely notice in specifically, I would say Madrid and France in this particular instance, that they were very consistent about the freshness of their bread. Every day that bread was fresh. Every day those croissants were fresh.
Yeah.
So that definitely add an element to it. And you're right, we ate a lot of bread, more than we typically would eat here, and felt fine.
And the living quarters there, I had to admire the people that live in those places. The apartments are much smaller than the Americans, and they were quite content in their space. And I realized that the more we get is the more we want. And it made me felt that when I get home, that I had was to reduce the amount of things that I have in my home, because it made me realize that less sometimes is more in health wise. It make me feel as if the more you get is the more stress you become to get more and more. It's like the more you get is the more you want. And it made me realize that sometimes less is better for your health, because it gives you that balance where You're not stressed about getting more on top of what you have. To me, it's like in America, the more rooms we have, we still not satisfied. We want more room.
Mm.
And for us to be in those small apartments and felt so at home and so peaceful, it really brought light to me in a way where I will like to reduce a lot of the things that I have and get less of it in my home.
Wow, that's quite a powerful observation, and it sounds like you had a life-changing moment. I've shared on this platform before. My goal for this year would to become more minimalist, and I'm still on the journey. And I would definitely say the lighter everything becomes is the lighter you feel. I agree that things and possessions are actually linked to our mental wellness. I completely agree with that. So let me ask you, have you started to downsize since you've been back?
Well, since I came back, I try to get rid of some of my quills because I said to myself, I don't need all these quills, and when you really think about it, you have so many and you don't even use them. Sometime a year pass and you haven't used some of these quilts or some of these dishes. And I said to myself, it's just taking up space. And when I look at the Europeans and they have so little, and yet still they're healthy, they're happier. Well, they're happy, and
Oh, they're pure happy.
it makes me wonder if, because we accumulate so many things, if sometimes it brings more stress in your life, because it's like the more you have, the more you want. My goal is to get rid of a lot of things that I haven't used in years. Sometimes when I looked in my closet and I see some of the quilts that I haven't touched for years, it really makes no sense having them around. And this is something that I've learned from the European. It's like less is more, and put more energy in your life than more energy on things.
I agree with you. And I would say that one of the things we've learned at this platform from our mental health specialists who have joined us on various topics is that the behavior of spending and the behavior of saving on both extremes is reflective of our mental health. So it's more so, to your point, it's more so that having these possessions is a sign of where we are in terms of our mental health, and a state of contentment would lead to the less hoarding, as Dr. Black would say, less hoarding and less purchasing of things also, and less episodes of extreme thriftiness that is also linked to the same toxic behaviors. So I agree with you. It's talking about toxicity in a way. We did notice also, on the other hand, that Europeans are heavier smokers, and certainly getting accustomed to all the laws and restriction in the US, going to countries where there's less restriction, I would definitely say I was coughing a lot more than I anticipated, even though the air, I would say, was a better quality air in Europe than it is in the US. But the direct person-to-person contact was a little bit of a struggle at times for me in particular, because the smoke makes me cough, and it irritates me, and I just don't really like the smell of it. So let's find out if that's true. Do you guys think, watching, that Europeans are more smokers actually, or is it just our perception? Are Americans more smoker, or is it just about the same? What do you think? I'm going to give you a few moments to think about that. And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to start to share the statistics about that. So we wanted to really not just share our impression, but also leave you guys with some legitimate stats about the differences in the two groups, I would say. Statistically, we know that according to the CDC, that the prevalence of smoking decreased from 20.9% in 2002, I'm sorry, in 2005 in the US down to 11.5% as of 2021. So a humongous drop. And there was very much, I would say, a very effective campaigning against smoking in the US. So I'm not too surprised that the numbers declined. And I'm certainly happy to know that the numbers declined because of all of the adverse outcomes related to smoking. But the degree of the decline is really impressive. So I hopefully we will continue to decline in those numbers. However, when we look at the European numbers, it is 19.7% of Europeans are those who are members of the European Union smoke on a daily basis. So I would say, yes, that was another striking difference that we noticed. Let's talk about obesity because my mom mentioned that they're a lot more physically fit and certainly way more active as I just shared statistically than Americans. So what does that translate into in terms of obesity rates? So we know that in the US, according to the CDC, the rate or prevalence of obesity is 41.9% amongst adults. And we also have high rates in children, but I'm going to just focus on adults for this particular talk. And obesity in Europe, what do you guys think? Is it higher or lower? Think about it for a moment. Is it higher or lower in Europe? We shared about the smoking. We shared about their level of physical activity. Their ear is better. They certainly appear to have a better mental wellness, so to speak, from us looking at from the outside in. And surprisingly, though, the rate or prevalence of obesity is 53% in the European Union. I'm shocked by that number, given how physically active they are. But again, that goes to show that there are obesity is a condition that has multiple factors that contribute to it, and it's not just physical activity, it's not just smoking, etc. And what does that lead to? Well, when we look at what's the primary cause of death, it is still cardiovascular health. So cardiovascular health is the top cause of death in both the European Union countries as well as the US. In Europe, it's been linked to specifically the alcohol consumption. We didn't touch on that. Alcohol consumption and smoking are considered to be still very much main factors as main risk factors for cardiovascular health in Europe. And in America, we know that sedentary lifestyle, inactivity, in addition to things like to a lesser degree, smoking and unhealthy eating habits and alcohol consumption, but to a less degree, those items, primarily more obesity, has been highly linked to cardiovascular disease in the US. So there we have it. All around, and I will definitely say the WHO has definitely said and stated that obesity is an increasing condition worldwide, and as we mentioned, has just a number of adverse outcomes, whether it's cardiovascular health linked to cancer rates, name it, problems with joints. Obesity definitely is a international, I would say, we learned the word pandemic, right? So surprisingly, and again, this varies per country according to 2019 statistics. For as an example, the percentage of obese women in Italy was 37%, whereas in Croatia it's 58%. The percent of obese men in France was 53%, whereas in Croatia is 73%. So again, there are huge variations depending on gender and country, but overall, the rates are sadly just as disappointing in Europe as it is in the US. What do you think about that, Mom? Did that surprise you to hear their obese rates?
It surprised me in a sense, but the smoking, I think, is so high there that it's kind of balanced out the
Mm-hmm.
food and the drinking and the smoking. It to me it balanced it out. But one thing I must say to your audience, Task, is that we climbed 200 stairs one day and we made it to the top.
Okay,
No,
let's talk about that because we were, as you mentioned, we walked. We was. I'm thankful to be in a family of walkers on both sides of my family. Um, Everyone walks, and I guess I would say it's more the lifestyle that we inherited from being islanders.
yeah,
Walking is a primary form of transportation, but we walked.
we,
So tell
I,
me about that because everything we did, every activity involved walking.
yes, when we get off the boat and they said we were going to visit,
Oh,
drop
when we went to Positano.
Positano. And
Hmm.
when we got off the boat, um,
We
when
were
we got,
along the Amalfi Coast is where we
yes,
were. Hmm.
yes, I was like, okay, let's go. Hallelujah. And
Uh-huh.
then we start walking and I realized we had to take all these stairs. I said to myself, oh my goodness, can I do all these stairs? And it seemed as if the more stairs I walk was the more I had to.
I think that helped though, because if we knew before we started that it was going to be over 200 plus stairs, we may not have gone up the stairs.
You, it was, but you know what? In spite of all those stairs, I felt so proud of myself.
You should be.
Age to be able to walk up 200 and plus stairs without being taken by anyone, had to do it all by myself. I felt so great. Even when I came back down, it was a victory dance for me at the end because I didn't
Because
go.
not only did you go up 200 plus stairs, you came back down 200 plus stairs.
Yes, yes. So
Yeah.
it was a wonderful thing. And it really let me know that I can do anything that you put your mind to, you can do it. And it teach me something while I was there, that life does not stop because you're a certain age. You can still
Mhm.
do things if you put your mind to it. And I was very proud of myself, and I give myself a tap on the shoulder for
Well, let me
keeping.
ask you a question. Did you anticipate that we would have been as physically active as we were on this trip?
No, no, I thought we were going from a car to the bus, from the bus to the car. I thought it was going to be something like that. But the amount of walking that we did, it made me feel so good because knowing that it, I walk when the days come. So I will
Tell us
encourage,
more about
and
that. How much are you walking?
I walk like 4 miles per day. And I will encourage anyone who thinks that they're too old or too young or too tired, just get up and start walking because it makes a difference in your life when you start doing it. It makes you
Mhm.
feel much better inside and it glows outside. So I
Yes.
encourage anyone to start walking or do some form of exercise because it will help you mentally and physically.
Yeah, I mean, and it's certainly as we go over these statistics, you are confirming the importance of being physically active on the health, both on the physical and the mental health. And for those for reference who are wondering just how much did we walk? How much do you guys think we walked in about 2.5 weeks? How much did you not including our travel days? Well, you can include those because we those were walking and lifting and lugging. Um, but we did an average of 4.59 miles per day. So thankfully, my mom was already doing an average of 4 miles per day. I think even at times up to 5 miles per day at home on a regular basis. And so it allowed her, that baseline fitness allowed her to be able to keep up with the challenge because we're saying 4.59 miles, but this includes cobblestone roads, which a lot of people may not necessarily be mindful of. that it includes the inclines that we mentioned. So these are not flat areas that we were walking. These were also inclined areas, and I don't have the stats on that yet. I do have the collected information, but I did not calculate the information for you guys. I just wanted to give you an overview of how much we walked. But yeah, we did a total of 82.64 miles in the time that we were traveling. So we walked a lot. But why did I mention the cobblestone? And Dr. Triss, if she was here today, she would probably expound more on this. But the cobblestoning requires you to keep a level of balance that you don't have to keep with a flat terrain, right? And so your body has to do a lot more work to walk over cobblestones than it does over even flooring, even grounding. If you have at certain points, I did realize that walking on the cobbled ground affected my back. So it's really important to be mindful of your posture, especially if you have chronic back issues. Because again, as Dr. Trissa has shared with us, from our feet to our neck is connected, right? And so if our feet are not leveled, it will certainly unmask chronic issues, whether it's in your neck or in your back or in your pelvis or in your joints, right? Not just the amount of walking we did, but the type of walking we did. The rigorous walking that we did include inclines and cobblestone ground in almost every single European country. Definitely wearing good footwear is important. And I would say, to my mom's point also, if you really want to see the best of, or if you really want to take advantage of traveling, and not just, I know some people, they travel for different reasons. Some people want to go and rest, and they use traveling to rest, to get away from the daily demand of their lives. But if you really are traveling with the intent of becoming one into a country and really seeing what that country has to offer and embracing their culture, it's going to require walking. And so you want to make sure that you are already on a certain level of physical activity before you travel. And even just outside of the countries, just the fact of lugging luggage is a lot of physical work. Okay, because when you're traveling for a long period of time, your suitcases are not empty. Our suitcases were packed, and there were certain things I needed for the conference. But it requires being physically fit to really endure the rigorous activity that's needed for traveling, because we were on and off planes, on and off trains. Okay, there was a lot of physical activity. So I celebrated with my mom when she got back down at the bottom of the stairs, because I realized how difficult and challenging that particular activity was, and just all of it. And this was towards the end of all of our walking. It got to the point I even had a blister on my foot as a result of the intensity of the walking that we did. So that being said, what would you say would be the take home message that for yourself, and anything you want to share with our viewers?
Well, first of all, I just want to tell you thank you for taking me on such a rare, interesting, and wonderful trip. I really enjoyed it. Thanks very much. And it wasn't hard keeping up with Taska because she's a very fast walker.
That's the New York in us.
Sometimes I had to chip along, walk around, walk, run a little, walk a little to keep up with her.
That's the
But
New York training.
but but it was very nice. I really enjoyed it, and I will encourage anyone to really go and see the outside world, see how people live, and try to minimize the things that we take pleasure in, and just, I think it really leave me with this feeling that less is more
Mhm.
when you can enjoy life without all these things around you. And it doesn't, as the doctor said, don't hoarder things that you don't really need. And you know what, Tasker? I think when you try not to buy as often as you used to, or you think that you need to, try not let I'm gonna try not to do that, because and just keep what you have and share it with others, and just be a blessing to others. You know what I'm saying? Let us try to live with less, love more, and be at peace with ourselves first and with others. That was something that I took away from this trip. Most and foremost is that we have to live peacefully with less and be happy.
I love that. I love that takeaway message. I would definitely say also to echo that message. I'm certainly very thankful. This was the very first time. What the purpose of this trip was the conference, the FIGO conference, and it was the very first time in almost 20 years of being in my profession that I was able to participate in a national or international conference. So that being said, I'll talk a different time about the disparities in that and just the availability and the opportunities for women of color to be able to participate in these major organization activities where we can feel a part of the body of science or the body of medicine internationally or even nationally, and making that more feasible for us all. So I was very thankful because attending the conference, I learned so much and just felt so much more inspired in my profession just to see one, the compassion and the commitment to caring for women worldwide. So before we go, one of the things I thought was really interesting about Europeans is just how they socialize. They seem to really value family time together. We saw lots and lots of family out, even in the middle of the week, just enjoying a walk, a stroll, or sitting in the open areas and having a good time. And just even the places we went to eat, it just seemed to be such a joyous spirit as people sat and ate and enjoyed their food and their drinking and their smoking, as we mentioned. And so I really enjoyed watching just how they tend to socialize, and they seem to be a lot more social, or at least outdoor socially, than we are in the US. But it was really great to see just the families gathering, the friends gathering, and we even chuckled a few times as the men in Spain would like sing as a gorgeous woman walked by, which I'm like, wow. Catcalling in the US is very different than catcalling in the European countries. It seems more complimentary, whereas here it just seems a little bit more invasive. But that was an interesting observation that I saw, that I really enjoyed about Europe. And also in terms of my experience as well, just observing the different cultures. As I travel, I try to, you guys know, I travel to other countries more, never really for my own self. It's usually to do some type of work, but this was an opportunity for me to really indulge in experiencing other countries, other cultures. And when I go, we really try to become one with the cultures. As my mom said, we stayed in apartments, not in tourist hotel areas, but really in the places where people lived who live in those particular cities. And that opened us to the opportunities to be able to live like they lived, eat like they ate, walk the same streets that they walked. So really becoming and being open to living like other people live and being open-minded about it is really important to really experience the depth of the experience of traveling to other countries. I try to remember my languages. That was a little struggle. My Spanish was okay. The French was a little bit hard. And Portugal was just beating me up to speak Portuguese. But it was just really such an enjoyable time. I'm very thankful to be able to be on that trip. I'm very thankful to have you accompany me on that trip in such a very precarious time in this world. To still be able to delight in certain moments is certainly a blessing. So that being said, you will not be able to find my mom on social media because she's not on social media. But thank you for joining us today. Maybe she will make another appearance at another time for another topic. This was amazing.
Welcome. You're welcome. Love you.
Love you too. And this is Dr. T, the hand behind the handle of Healthy Bump Club, right here on YouTube. And as always, the hand behind the handle of Healthy Bump Club on Instagram. We thank you guys for watching us today. We thank you for supporting us in whichever way you decide to do so. And we just encourage you to continue to support us so we can get this information out to the masses. We hope you join us for the next episode. Bye.